At Adapt Community Network, we are here for you. Adapt believes that individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and the families that advocate for them deserve support. Project Connect is your information and referral resource offering assistance and support to accessing services at Adapt Community Network, from rehabilitation programs, healthcare services, and school-age programs to housing assistance and more. Our experts also provide information and referral services to agencies and organizations outside of ADAPT that serve individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities throughout the 5 boroughs. If you have questions, we have answers. Call us Monday through Friday at 877-827-2666 or email us at projectconnect@adaptcommunitynetwork.org and let us connect you with the services you need.
Hello, and welcome to Adapt Community Network's 2021 Virtual Family Connect Summit. We are so pleased that you can join us. This is Session 8, Partnering with Parents, Lessons from the Pandemic, and our session will begin shortly following this brief introduction. My name is Tracy Picard, and I am the Vice President of Family Support Services here at Adapt Community Network. Adapt is a nonprofit provider of services for children, teens, and adults with intellectual or developmental disabilities who live across the 5 boroughs of New York City. To learn more about our range of services, please call Project Connect, our information referral line, at 877-827-2666. During this session, there will be a discussion about the physical, emotional, and spiritual lessons learned from the pandemic, and a look at the impact that the pandemic has had on family engagements, relationships with the community, and the changing expectations and outcomes for students in schools. Our presenter is Evelyn Alvarez, Senior Director, Family Partnerships at Ramapo for Children. Ms. Alvarez has worked with young people and families in youth development and after-school settings for 15 years. After this session, we encourage you to submit questions by emailing them to projectconnect@adaptcommunitynetwork.org. We hope you enjoy the session.
Hi, how are you? My name is Evelyn Alvarez, and I'm the Senior Director for Family Initiatives at Ramapo for Children. That's a mouthful, right? Over the last 18 months, my colleagues and I have been super honored to be able to plan, create, and facilitate hundreds of workshops for thousands of families in New York City and around the country in some instances. These workshops have been about anything from collaborating with partners for families who receive external supports in any way, whether that be paraprofessionals, therapists of any sort throughout this time, to really gain some skill and understanding of how to optimally support their children. We have classes, workshops that are geared and created specifically for grandparents. So we have Consejo para Abuelos, counsel for grandparents who are actually caregivers, right? And who are primarily doing the caregiving for their grandchildren. We have building relationships while at home, structures and routines, lots of different offerings for parents and caregivers. And we've been so fortunate to be able to partner with amazing organizations around the city, including the Office of Multilingual Learners, ADAPT, agencies that have asked for specific and customized support. We've also worked with the Department of Early Childhood in specific trainings. So we have really had the broad gamut of supports and offerings for different groups. We've worked with educators, we've worked with parents, and I think that right now we're in a place where we're able to take stock of exactly what it is that we've learned, and we've learned quite a bit. Over the last year, like I've said, our workshops, the attendance has skyrocketed, and we've had on average a 400% increase in 2020 from the workshops that we did in 2019. So that also lets us know that parents want to show up, that they want to, and that in some instances, Zoom has been an exceptional opportunity for them to be able to participate and also multitask, right? Because so many parents are multitasking right now, so many parents and caregivers. We've had lots and lots of lessons that we've had over the pandemic. And so over the course of this talk, I'm going to share a few of them. First and foremost, we're also looking at some of the most popular sessions that were requested from us as part of where we get our data from. And so one of the lessons that was really valuable for us and a real reminder is that self-care mattered throughout the last 18 months. We have a workshop called Self-Care for Caregivers, but it's really just a reminder for caregivers that they were tired. Like, we kept getting information from caregivers that were like, woo, I am exhausted. I don't know what's happening. And so even before we move anymore, I definitely want you to stop if you're a caregiver and just give yourself a round of applause that is so deserved for the ways in which we've had to pivot and just learn, right? And we are doing all of that out of love and appreciation for our children. So kudos to you if you're a parent or a caregiver and educator that has really put your own fear aside, put your own doubts aside to be able to actively support another person in their growth and their well-being. So thank you so much for the ways in which you've opted to show up for the children of New York City. We appreciate you and we honor your efforts. Thank you. And because of that, self-care was really popular. Just kind of like, what do? I don't even know what to do. And sometimes, it's really thinking about self-care from a broader perspective, right? We talked about self-care as not just going to get a manicure, although that is really beautiful, but sometimes having to sit in that silence, right? For many of us, we were physically in locations that maybe were less than optimal, where we had to really sit with some ideas of, what do I want after this is done, right? Maybe I need to stop watching the news. Maybe I need to start watching the news. Maybe I need to get a crock pot, right? One of the running jokes, especially on places like Instagram, is that lots of people went out and bought an air fryer, right? But an air fryer might be self-care, right? If it leads to healthier cooking, ease, where you can now pass on to your children and they can support you and teach them how to cook from this air fryer. So there are lots of different things that really came up for us in our self-care sessions. The second thing that we've learned from this pandemic is that resources are abundant and they're not at the same time. There are lots of resources, but also being able to build a community that openly shares resources is critical. So whether that be talking to other parents, meeting new people that also share a lot of your same life challenges or wins, to be able to say, like, did you hear this? Go here and speak to that person, right? Call Maria at Adapt to be able to get some unique information. What we learned also, and we didn't learn it, but it was reinforced, was how much love and appreciation there is for parents and caregivers, and also respect of the work that they do. Like, so many of our partners really said to us, please offer things that people can utilize right away. People are in crisis in many instances, and they really need something that is not going to take 5 other steps, but simplicity reigns. Right? So tell me something that I can utilize right now. I joke often that sometimes when you go to workshops, that strategies can be kind of like your grandma's good china, right? That you're almost never, it's beautiful, but it's not really accessible, right? That if you can't use the plate, what's the point? And so for my team and I, we really aim to give strategies that are immediately implementable, because we know that when people call or they come, they're also coming with the hope that they have something not just to offer, but also that they can take away to improve their own lives immediately. So there's also that. We also thought quite a bit about virtual learning and what that looks like, and what really is, for all of us, we had to really readjust and reimagine what it is that we thought. I definitely believe that prior to the pandemic, that screens were considered the enemy, right? And there are some things that obviously, like, depending on where you land and your lifestyle, that as most people try to reduce screen time, while still recognizing that in this case, we also were very reliant on it for learning, for communicating, for socializing, and all of those things. And so also being able to be clear about what is screen time and virtual learning and how that works, right? Versus what to do when you're not off screen. And so the responsibility became, what can we offer that is really going to be in collaboration to not keeping my child or even myself on screen time, but really like can maximize the time that we have together. We talked a lot about structures and routines. And so in that case, it's like, what are the structures and routines that we also have in our household so that people can feel connected, so that we can make time for connection? And remembering that connection is not just with like the children, right? But between adults, having time to really like look through your bills or plan for your family, like that type of thing, and what children needed, because in many instances for a significant portion of this pandemic, we kind of had no clue about how long it was going to last. So initially, I don't know about y'all, but for a while, I thought, oh, it's going to be like 2 weeks. We're going to be off 2 weeks and then we're going to go right back in. And then 2 weeks became 2 months and 2 months became 6 months. And so you were kind of like off all the time in our routines. It was a little bit difficult, but having those routines was also part of what kept us like stayed the course. So whether those routines were, okay, I know that my child has virtual learning at 9 a.m. and 11 a.m., has a therapy appointment, like keeping on task was very helpful for many of us. So there are lots of other, just things that we have learned, including the fact that for a lot of caregivers, they learned that not everything is in their control. For those of us who were really streamlined and said like, okay, this time I have to do that time I have to do this, we were also playing and really having to operate from like a very like, okay, we'll see what happens kind of moment. And we did. So kudos to us collectively for also being able to recognize that there were lots of things that we did not know, but that together we can get to the point of learning and supporting each other. Thinking about things like the idea that spending time with your family is a privilege, right? That many of us may or may not have had. And that for some of us, we never really had. This is the maximum amount of time that some people said and shared in many instances that they had actually spent with their children. So lots of parents said, I've never been with my child this long. I don't know them as a learner. I don't know what they're like as a student. And so being able to also observe your child learning in real time, let you know like, you're a little bit different, right? Or maybe not, but really thinking about the fact that we got so much entree into how it is that our children are being taught, what it is that they're learning, and also a beautiful opportunity to be part of that process. Also just the humility of this era, right? Like we were able to recognize, we don't know. For many of us, and by many of us, I mean me, we've never been in a pandemic before. I've never parented. And so being able to parent my child throughout this pandemic was really humbling for me, for instance, because I now had to help my child navigate a whole bunch of different things that he didn't know and that I didn't know. And, it just kind of reinforces your commitment as a family to say, I don't know. And that was new for me because even though I do this work and I almost tell parents all the time, like, be humble, apologize. It was jarring for me to say like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. Right. And that was a continued learning for myself, that everything that I knew about adulthood was placed on the table, right? Like Marie Kondo style, like where you put all your stuff on the bed and you realize like certain things that you've learned no longer serve you. And so you have to commit to being able to taking it out of your repertoire because you know what, that doesn't really work. I don't know all the things, but we can commit to learning together. And that became my new statement for my son. Let's figure it out. Like many other families out there. We also got to redefine safety, and that was a lesson from the pandemic. In summer of 2020, when there was so much focus on race and racial harm in the United States, it was also really important for us to redefine safety, right? Like, what are the let's move beyond cultural awareness, but cultural respect, cultural recognition that we need to also include in programs in schools so that our children feel safe and seen, so that parents feel safe and valued. These are all things that also we learned throughout the pandemic, and it forced a much needed shift in the lens that we have, right? This is also an opportunity for parents, caregivers, educators to be able to say, are we looking at things from a deficit lens? What do we need to learn and also unlearn in order to create the type of learning environments that we say we are, or to recreate them, or to redefine them? So that was definitely super important. Just reminding ourselves that small moments are important too, right? Small moments matter. And so for the parents who happen to have seen their children's first steps because they might have been working otherwise, right? For the parents that were able to just go to the park with their child and walk, right? And watch television or do things or do nothing. Like that also mattered, right? And so the establishment or the re-establishment or the kind of just creation of hobbies. Remember hobbies? Remember how that used to be when I was a child? My mom used to crochet and she was always sewing and making things. And I was like, I don't have a hobby. So being able to have a hobby was really, really beautiful. And so for many of us, like I've always loved reading and I had kind of set that aside. One of the things that I did was that I dusted off my library card, right? Well, actually, I got a library card, right? And I was able to do that through the application Simply E. Simply E, because of the fact that the libraries were closed in New York City, you were able to apply for one online where you would get like a barcode or something, but there are different apps. So there's Simply E, there's Libby, there's Overdrive, and all of them have different, you can borrow different books. So with each, like in New York City, I believe that there are 3 different library systems, right? So there's the New York, there's the Brooklyn, and there's the Queens. And each one of them allows you to take out different amounts of books. But I loved it. I've listened to audiobooks. I have read all these novels that just took me right back to my teenage years. So that was such a distractor for me, because when things are going like hectic and I really didn't know what to do or what to expect next, there was so much illness. I should share that I also got COVID, as did my partner. We became caregivers along with my sister for my mother who has Alzheimer's. So like so many other families, so many different changes, and there were constant adaptations. Many parents out there were not just taking care of their own children, but also monitoring the well-being of their own parents. And so these are also things that we learned, like, wow, what do I need to do? How do I need to be in order to be able to manage all the things that are happening? Some parents weren't able to work because of different reasons. Some parents did have to work and navigate the physical and emotional, mental safety that they had to have in order to continue while still taking care of the well-being of their children. So these are all the things that were happening for many people, including some other things, right? But just really recognizing how small things, small efforts, right? For me, those 15 pages that I would read that would have me riveted and take me out of my own reality became a lifeline. And so I wanted to also share some of the books that I've read over the last year that were really helpful for me, that were really that really enabled me to look at certain elements of my life that I really wanted to make improvements on, and that I was like, all right, girl, get it going. So I really wanted to learn. My son is 16, and I found him, I felt like he was in a decline after a while. Like he was one of those kids that some kids did really well at home, right? They actually were able to be self-motivated and focused. I would say that my son really learns better in community. And I started to really feel as if he was starting to have symptoms of anxiety based on what I knew. And so one of the things that I read was this one. It's called Seen. Healing despair and anxiety in kids and teens through the power of connection. And so really what it does is that it tells you a little bit about how the brain works. And it's in this case, this is like a convergence of kind of faith and psychology, which is frankly not typically the route that I would go, but someone had recommended it and I thought it was pretty helpful. Also, this one called Widening the Circle, which is the power of inclusive classrooms. A lot of the work that we do at Ramapo is with educators. And so what does it look like to have an inclusive classroom? What is that part of it? And what can we do? And so thinking about just difference, right? Like, what does it mean to be different? And what does it mean to segregate? And so things of that nature, like this was really, really helpful for people who have children who are looking to learn more about inclusion. Also, this book was really beautiful for me, Cultivating Genius by Goldie Muhammad. And so basically, it's really a lot about literacy. We always talk about how to teach young people how to read and the benefits of it. But really, in this, Dr. Goldie Muhammad talks about a 4-layered framework of identity, skills development, intellect, and criticality. And really, it speaks particularly to parents of children of color, caregivers and educators of children of color, because of the way that our children can often be marginalized in the educational system. I read, these are the ones that I bought, but I'm going to share some more because I do think that they are helpful. And a lot of these you can also find, whether it be at the library. So here are some. This is the whole brain child, right? And it's really about thinking about what are some 12 strategies that foster healthy brain development with the outcome of calmer and happier children, while also recognizing that as caregivers, sometimes we're just turned up. Like we like it like lively and fun. So I don't want to suggest that calm is the optimal or the only way that children should be, but that it is a way that also enables them to have to take in information, right? To take in information, to understand deeply, to empathize, all the things. So I also read for myself, You Are Your Best Thing, right? Which is a collaboration between Brene Brown and Tarana Burke. Brene also has a podcast that is very popular, and it was an anthology of 12 people, including one of my friends. Where is she? Tanya Fields is actually a friend of mine. So that was pretty exciting to be able to see that she had written an anthology, which is a beautiful essay that is in this book by Tarana Burke. And it is about vulnerability, shame, resilience, and the Black experience. So lovely, lovely, lovely essays in this book. And because I am a human, I'm just like, listen, I don't know about y'all. There are lots of parents out there who may have been, I'm not going to say probably, but may have been checking on themselves, because a lot of people, like a lot of my friends would say things like, oh girl, I need green space. I need to move, right? And so many of us know people who left New York City in general over the course of this pandemic because they wanted literally greener pastures, right? Like you need to have some space for your children to go outside and run. And for me, I was immediately like, ooh, I don't know, I don't have that, right? So I also read Tiffany Alicia's Get Good with Money. And it was a beautiful book that really did allow you to have a basic primer for those of us that are starting with like just kind of looking at our numbers and thinking about, wow, our kids are getting a little older. There's so many things that I would like to do with them. And the thing that is stopping me from also being able to optimize my parenthood is my maybe I don't have enough money. So really being honest with ourselves, right? And that was part of our self-care. And we talk about that in our self-care workshop around what it looks like to think about our own finances as part of our self-care. So there are lots of different things that we are doing, but really another thing that was critical throughout this pandemic is communication. Right? For many of us, especially if you were kind of raised like me, where my mom used to say, si no tienen nada bueno que decir, no digan nada. If you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything. That somehow there's a generation of people who were left not really having an opportunity or an ability or the skill set that is needed to have the most meaningful relationships, because we're out here like not really knowing how to have difficult conversations. And so communication if we don't have that ability to really like step into things for the purpose of our own growth or our efforts, then we lose an opportunity to connect or be as vulnerable as we can be with ourselves, with our children, with our partners, with our colleagues, right? With people that matter to us. And so learning how to communicate is exceptionally important, and being able to be courageous. right? And so these are some of the things that I think we learned over the last year that have shown up for us time and time again. We also talk about movement, because that was really important. Like for many of us, for example, like myself, my colleagues, where we might start the day at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning and just sit at the computer until 8 p.m. The ability to move, might have been the first time in my life that I missed the subway. Like, having steps. Like I used to go probably on average have about 15,000 steps a day on my Fitbit. And all of a sudden I went from 15,000 to maybe 1,500 on a good day, because there's only so many times you can go to the fridge, right? So just really recognizing what that would do. And also children need that, right? For those of us that might have had smaller kids, and also really like opportunities to be creative with it. In New York City, many of us live in apartments. So you may have a neighbor that is frustrated by your child running around, but we were able to really think and come up with creative ways to get children and family the movement that they may have if they have it, even if it's just to go outside and feel some sun on your skin. Like these are all things that were so important throughout the course of the pandemic. The other side of it is that in terms of how this all affects our children, is that we were able to develop and create, and in instances recreate, a set of skills, strategies, tools that we were able to use throughout the course of this pandemic to be able to support us. And now we are navigating and drawing on that set of skills as we start to reintegrate school. What does it look like to feel safe? Right? We have different questions now. What does safety look like? What are the plans? I mean, our children are so, people say kids are resilient, but beyond that, they're just brilliant, right? In the way that they can create a space that they understand, mask usage, right? That sometimes they'll hold us accountable. For many of us, especially for parents whose children have a recent diagnosis, they've also learned more about the diagnosis, right? They've had opportunity to really see their child in their fullness for 24 hours a day, for months at a time. And now you may have a different perspective about what you need to do or what they need than what is even on the IEP or what is being said. Now you have an opportunity to go back and say, I think my child can do this, or I would like to see them work on this, right? And so that is a beautiful equalizer for caregivers and parents in terms of how they were able to see their children, how they're able to experience their children, how they're able to have a deeper connection and to understand and to think about what a therapy session goes, what the experience is of their children when they're in therapy, for instance. Lots of people shared that they didn't really have an idea of what their children was doing on a day-to-day, right? In some instances, you drop your children off at school, they receive services that they have there, and then you pick them up without full understanding of what is happening. So it has been, at its best, it has been a beautiful opportunity for parents and caregivers to really deepen their own understanding and learning about what it is that their children are doing, and also to have a deeper understanding of what educators, therapists, paras are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, because I think that that's also important too. And then on the parent side, also, those educators were also able to see what parents are doing, how they're learning, what shifts they're making, be able to have more FaceTime so that information could be shared more clearly, directly, quickly, right? So these are all some of the things that really were lessons of the pandemic. And most importantly, we want to say that what we have seen time and again are just the love for children that has been so heartwarming, so humbling, so amazing. The love from parents who are afraid, who show up anyway. The love from educators who wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to respond to text messages or answer questions or confirm that they are okay or encourage parents to bring children in. The love of just people in programs like ADAPT, where they're constantly really just asking for deeper content, They're asking us to really like rethink what it is that we're doing. They're asking us to not stay at a surface level, but to really go deeply for the benefit of families and educators in New York City. We cannot say enough about these collaborations and how meaningful they've been for us as an agency and as individuals, in terms of the way that we have also learned, and we don't take it lightly, that so many different families from different pockets of our city have given us access to their truth and their lives throughout this time. So it has been such, despite all of the tremendous losses, and my condolences to anyone out there who's lost someone or something that they really cared for deeply, because I think that's an important part of the process also. But just recognition of how collectively as a society, as a group of people, we've done so much and we've learned so much. We are grateful for the access that we've been given time and again with families and caregivers and educators. Amazing programs like ADAPT, where they have really adjusted and listened to caregivers and worked with collaborating agencies to be able to ensure that families were receiving information, strategies, and tools that felt meaningful and were relevant to their lives at this time. Our lessons were, parents are listening, they are there, they want to learn. Asynchronous content, which means like videos that you can look at on YouTube at 5 o'clock in the morning if you choose, that matters. That children are resilient and amazing and brilliant and genius and wonderful. We learned that we don't give power, that people are born into their power, and that our role as caregivers, as facilitators, was to help them see the power that they had so that they can use it in a way that impacts families most meaningfully. I can go on and on, as you can see, but these are our pandemic lessons. We are so grateful for you for participating in this session, for listening this long, and we can be reached at ramaphoforchildren.org. Such a great pleasure. Thank you very much. My name is Evelyn Alvarez. Bye.